Welcome to Ingrid's World Television Show. My name is Ingrid Paris-Hicklin, and I am the host and executive producer of the show. I'm excited to welcome Bob Levey to the show. Many of you know Bob Levey, particularly if you are an avid Washington Post reader like I am. You have read his columns, and on this show, Bob will talk about the golden era of the Washington Post and being the first reporter hired by the legendary Ben Bradlee, managing editor and later executive editor of the Washington Post. And yes, Bob was there at the Post during Watergate. An award-winning journalist, Bob is a national treasure, and he has written a book. Yes, I have it. So let's welcome Bob to the show. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. Good to be here.
Great to have you. So tell us a little bit about your career.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I am now in my 56th year of being a working journalist. I've spent the great majority of that time at the Washington Post. I'm a great big fan of print journalism, but I have also had long careers in radio and television. I have taught journalism at 6 universities. I think the bug has bitten me pretty hard.
What an inspiration you are. Describe being the first reporter hired by the legendary Ben Bradlee.
Well, Ingrid, I was just the luckiest duck who ever quacked. I didn't even think I was going to be interviewed by Bradlee. It was 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, and he had taken over for the previous editor over the weekend because the previous editor had been named the ambassador to the United Nations by President Johnson.
Oh, wow.
So Bradlee asked me what the last book was that I had read, and it happened to be a book about bridge, the card game. And for some reason, I told him the truth. You know, he obviously wanted me to say David Copperfield or something like that. And we ended up having a long discussion about bridge, and he loved it. And he stood up and stuck out his hand and said, "You are hired," on the spot. And so I can go to my grave, I hope in 100 years or so, saying that I was the first person hired by the legend himself.
Wow. I mean, that is like amazing. So tell us about your work at the Washington Post. I mean, radio, and then you're a TV commentator. What's that about?
Well, I started the way a lot of people do in print journalism by being a police reporter. And I spent nearly a year in a car that had no heater and no cooler, driving around the streets of Washington, chasing police calls on the radio. And there were 2 radios. One was the police radio, the other was a 2-way radio back to the city desk. And my job was to get the news. And it was great training for breaking news. It was great training for how to interview people under pressure. What it wasn't so great at was when the times when I would arrive at the scene of a crime before the police did. And the victim would run up to me and say, "He went that way, he went that way." And I'd have to say, "Oh, no, I'm not a police officer. I'm just a lowly reporter." That happened more than once.
More than once. Oh, my goodness. So tell us about the awards that you have received for your work.
Well, I have received a lot of awards, I'm happy to say, but thank you for mentioning this. I think the biggest awards that I have received are being chosen 7 times as the best columnist in Washington by Washingtonian magazine. But I was also chosen by Washingtonian as a Washingtonian of the Year in 1999. And then I got 2 big awards in the world of talk radio. One was Best Talk Show Host in America in the 90s,
wow,
and then Best Talk Show Host in the Washington Market in the late 90s. And what's funny about that, Ingrid, is that I got that award for being Best Talk Show Host in the Washington Market, and 2 months later, they fired me.
What?
That's radio, kids.
Oh my goodness! Wow, I guess that's radio. Okay. Well, tell us about the golden era of the Washington Post. I mean, there's so much talk about it. Let's hear firsthand from you.
really the key players that made it a golden era were, of course, Ben Bradley, of course, the president and later the publisher, Katharine Graham. Of course, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein were tremendously influential in all of that. But there were lots of other people who made the era as golden, excuse me, as it was. A lot of them were the senior political reporters on the national desk. Names like David Broder, names like Haynes Johnson, names like Bill Grider. These guys were the best in the business, and they were particularly good at bringing along little pups like me who needed to learn from the best in the business. So it was a golden era, not just because the product that we dished out was so good and so popular, but because there was a feeling in the newsroom that said, we're going to do this, we're going to do this right, we're going to do this in the face of pressure, and we're going to do this for the readers. And that's what a great newspaper does.
Wow. I mean, just beautiful. And, hey, looked at the Post this morning. So, I get yes, I'm one of those that like to have the newspaper thrown into the driveway. But that's
well, I
me.
hope that if you read it this morning, ink on paper, Ingrid, all I can say is that you better do that while you can, because those days are rapidly going away, very rapidly. I would be very surprised if there is still an ink on paper Washington Post in 5 years.
Wow, wow. What a outlook. Well, what was it like to be at the Washington Post during the time of Watergate?
Well, it began as crawling out on a limb and watching the Nixon administration saw off the limb. It was all so crazy and so implausible. The President of the United States is directing crimes from the Oval Office, really? And here are these two young reporters, both of them in their 20s, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who were working this story hard and every minute of every day. And at first, the attitude in the newsroom was, this just can't be true. And these guys are going to come up with egg all over their faces. It's going to embarrass them. It's going to harm the newspaper terribly. And then, as time went on, and they began to develop more and more layers of this story, and they began to follow the mantra that the great Deep Throat told them about, which was follow the money. And once they kept following the money, they began to discover that indeed the trail led right back to the Oval Office. And that led, of course, to the resignation of Richard Nixon.
Wow. And you worked, when we were talking earlier, you said you were right beside Woodward and Bernstein.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
You were right near Woodward and Bernstein while they were reporting this?
Yes, I was sitting right there between them all during Watergate. I will never know why the Washington Post didn't move me out from between them. It would have made a lot of sense, but the Post, let's just say, was not always the best managed place in the whole world. And every day and late in the afternoon, editors would come over and hover over us and hover over Woodward and hover over Bernstein. And I like to say, Ingrid, that my one regret in all of these years of working there is that even though Woodward and Bernstein were immortalized in the movie All the President's Men, I was not in the movie, even though I was right there between them every single day.
What's that about?
It's terrible. I could have been best supporting actor. I should have been.
Hello?
I put on a show every afternoon when these guys would come over. I would turn to the right and say, hey guys, would you go somewhere else? I'm trying to get some work done here. And they never listened to me. But
oh, wow.
The good news, Ingrid, is that there's some gossip now that they're going to do a remake of All the President's Men. It's now 50 years since the Watergate break-in. And if they do that, I may get my second chance. And if they don't choose me, at least they'll, of course, choose Brad Pitt to play Bob Levey. That's certainly.
Ooh, I like that. But you know what? Imagine, I mean, you were there and it was happening. Also very interesting, Katharine Graham is the publisher. Tell us about that being.
Well, Catherine Graham, I think, in many ways was the most important person at the Post during the golden era because, as she used to say, we do great journalism every day, but that isn't going to get you a whole lot if you're not working for and creating a great business. And she certainly did that. Remember that she came into that job only because her husband committed suicide. She never had any intention of doing it. She had no training whatsoever, no preparation. And she just stepped in and said, you know what? I think I can do this. I'm going to try to do this. And a lot of people advised her not to try, almost all of the men. And she said, I'm sorry, I'm going to do this. And my gender isn't really important. What is important is making sure that we do things right. And I will tell you that Catherine Graham is a legend in our newspaper and in the business for standing in the schoolhouse door and standing up to the Nixon administration, not once, but twice.
Twice.
Once on the Pentagon Papers when the Nixon administration wanted the Post not to publish this top secret information, and the Post wanted to, and the case went to the Supreme Court and we won, mostly because Catherine Graham was tough. And then just a few months later, people forget this. It was only a few months later that the Watergate break-in happened, and Catherine Graham had to be tough once more. This woman was tough in the right ways. She was also compassionate in the right ways. I can't imagine a better publisher.
Oh my goodness. We're showing a picture of you with your children and Catherine Graham.
Oh, yes.
Shared with us. What impressed you the most about her?
I think what impressed me most about her, unlike so many other newspaper publishers, is that she never forgot what the enterprise was really about. And what it was about was news. What it was about was fairness. What it was about was accuracy. You know, getting those ads and getting the circulation, that was all great and very necessary. But none of it would have mattered if the product itself didn't appeal to lots of people. And it did. And remember this, that it appealed to people all over the metropolitan area of Washington whose politics could be very, very different and whose politics could be 180 degrees different from the politics of the editorial page. And yet they subscribed. And yet they bought their copy out of one of those little racks on the street corner because the Post had information that just wasn't going to happen anywhere else. And it was accurate, and it was fair, it was thorough, and people could trust that.
And as a big Washington Post reader, I'm constantly going back to the Post because what you see on network, honestly, they're reading the Post and then they're just putting glimpses of it on television. I see it all the time. I said, if you really want to read the story, know about it, read the Post.
Well, that's about right. And, you know, there's nothing more important in any business than your reputation. And the Post, mostly thanks to Watergate, but for many other reasons, over many, many years, built that reputation in the right way. It was the go-to brand. And when Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford immortalized those two guys on the silver screen, the Post was destined to be famous forever. It still is.
It still is.
It's
I don't care where you are in the country. You mention the Washington Post, people stop. They really do. In fact, I'm getting a lot of kudos because people know I'm interviewing you. How amazing is that?
Happy to be of service.
Thank you. I have your book, and I'm enjoying it.
Oh, thank you.
Tell us all about this wonderful book.
I will tell you all about it. The book is called Larry Felder Candidate. It's a novel that I wrote recently, and the plot is very simple. Larry is a famous Washington newspaper columnist who abandons journalism to run for Congress in the Washington suburbs. And all kinds of stuff happens to poor Larry. Love happens and corruption happens and the unexpected happens and those nasty newspaper reporters get in his way. but the good guys do win in the end. And I know I said this is a novel. Nothing in the book actually happens, but all of it could happen because I took a lot of pains to make it very accurate. And if you're a fan of what really goes on in the sausage factory of journalism, you could learn it in this book. And if you're a fan of how political campaigns really operate, you can find out in this book. Larry Felder, candidate. And I do want to say, though, Ingrid, that a lot of people ask me whether I am Larry Felder or Larry is me. No, 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 1,000 times no.
Okay, because that's where I was going to go.
I would never give up journalism, not ever. I would never run for Congress or anything else. I ran for the student council in the 8th grade and I lost, and it was so devastating that I've never run for anything again. So I think we're going to have to leave it up to Larry to be the pretty boy horse out there in the political realm.
Well, I'm just a big fan of yours now because I really love your part about New York and describing, City College and that whole area. I'm a New Yorker.
I mean, here I say that Larry is not me and I am not Larry, but we do cross over a lot. I was born and raised in the Bronx, and that's why, as you said, Ingrid, so much of the book early is set in the Bronx. But I do want to stress for all of you who live here in the Washington area, 90% of the book takes place right here in our home area. And the Bronx is just a table setting for what comes later.
It really is, because I like the idea, and not to give anything away, but just hopefully to tease people, is that I like the fact that you give us the backstory about him and his wife. We're not going to say what happened to the wife, but it was kind of, let's say, decent. Sometimes you read stuff and it makes you feel uncomfortable. But reading that was like, God, this is decent. I can read this and I can go to sleep.
Thank you. The biggest challenge when you write an 80,000 word book like the one you're holding in your hand, Ingrid, is that you have to build out the plot in a very wide, round way. And that's exactly what does not happen in journalism. I wrote a daily column for the Post for more than 23 years, and every thought I ever thunk had to be written in 720 words. Every one. Wow. Whether I had more to say or less to say, I always had to fit it in there. And to be able to write a book like Larry Felder, Candidate, was actually very liberating, because I could do what you just said. I could build underneath Larry's character by describing his wife. I could build underneath Larry's character by describing some of the other people he worked with at the newspaper. And then in the political realm, there were lots of people, and you'll meet them all in this book.
Yeah, it's a fun book. And there's a lot of things that are happening that I kept on saying, I wonder if this is this person or this is that person.
Well, everybody in the book is modeled on somebody, let's put it that way. And I think this is true of fiction most of the time. Unless you got a very lively imagination, it's never as good as borrowing on your life experience. And, one of the great things about my career has been that I have met some of the most fascinating people, both good and bad. And in Larry Felder, Candidate, you will meet all of them.
Yeah, it's a fun read. It's good, but it's also, I would say it's instructional, because you take us behind the scenes of what goes on with a campaign and the things that people will do. I mean, oh my goodness. And there's one that you think that you can really trust, but she really can't trust because she has her own agenda. I'm like,
she certainly has her own agenda.
Whoa.
Ingrid is talking about the second most important character in the book, who is Larry's campaign manager, a young woman who is very good at her job. Her nickname is Charlie.
Yeah.
And Charlie is Larry's girl, Friday, but Charlie would also like to be Larry's girl Monday, girl Tuesday. You get the idea. And that romance never really gets off the ground, although, well, read the book.
You got to read the book, you know. But it's just so, when you read it, I'm going like, oh, what? What a fun book, fun book.
Well, thank you, and you can find it through bobleveypublishing.com if you're so inclined.
Oh, really good. Bob, what inspired you to write the book?
I think that I wanted to do a memoir about the golden era at the Post, a straight one, and I started it, and I said, this isn't really getting it, and what I really want to do is weld together my experience in journalism with my long experience in local politics. And I thought that the best way to do that would be through a realistic novel, and that's what I've tried to do.
Well, you've done it very well. But I have to ask you this question. What has been the key to your success for over 50 years? Okay, I'm all ears. What has been the key?
You're all ears? Okay. Well,
hello.
I know this may make me sound like a wise guy, Ingrid, but honestly, the key to my success is two things. One, coffee. I am the biggest coffee addict you will ever meet, and all I can say is that when you have to produce on deadline as much as I have and as often as I have, you've got to be on your game. And one way to get on your game is through at least 4 cups of coffee a day and sometimes more. And I confess to that addiction. I think it really, I know that sounds silly, but it's not silly. When it's time to produce and you've got 25 minutes to write a whole column for the Washington Post, and you know, you don't feel so good, you pour yourself one more, bam, there you are. But the other thing that has really made my career, and I'm sincere about this, is my wife, Jane, my partner for nearly 45 years now, who is a professional editor and who has edited every word I have ever written, usually before the real editors edit it. This woman is so good. She has kept me out of trouble so many times. She has made what I write better. Every writer needs an editor. And I don't want to hear this in the internet era that, oh, it's so free, you can put anything up online you want. That's the bad news. The good news is if you put something in a serious journal like the Post and it's been edited carefully, you are better for it.
You're better for it. And that's what my next question is. How has journalism changed with the use of social media?
Oh my gosh, how much time do you have? The business is completely upended from top to bottom. The business model of print journalism is done. That model always depended on advertising, not on circulation, interestingly. A lot of people make that mistake, but the ads are what floated the boat, and the ads are gone. The ads are gone to the internet, and the eyeballs are gone to the internet, and tremendous fortunes are being made on the internet with something that looks like news and smells a little like news, but it isn't at all the same. And what we have lost is the distinction between carefully reported and edited hard news and opinion. The Post always had a bright red wall in between those two. And now you can go online any day, any minute of any week, and you can't tell the difference. And that's actually good for some people because they have made a lot of money smudging that distinction. But I think we all lose from that, and we're losing every day.
Yes, exactly. So what words of advice do you have for someone who's watching this and says, you know what, I want a career in journalism? What do you say?
The biggest thing I can say is do not let the naysayers push you away from this career. It has always been the most exciting career I could imagine. It still is. The problem is that no one is going to have a career like mine where they work for the same newspaper for 55 years and they get a pension on the first of the month and they got health insurance all those years, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that will happen, but I think
Yes.
very rewarding careers in journalism are still possible. They are still necessary for the social world in which we live. And if you want to see the real thing up close, if you want a ringside seat, there is no better profession. And if you want to test yourself as a writer and a reporter, there is no better profession.
Wow. Inspirational, Bob, really. Well, I have to just thank you so much for being an outstanding guest. I mean, I just got excited with you talking about the post and about the book, which I absolutely love. But taking the time to talk about journalism and how it's changing. And so you're a treasure, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure. And best to you, Ingrid, and to everybody out there. Thanks so much.
My inspirational quote is from Aristotle. It is during our darkest moments that we must focus to see the light. Thank you so much for watching this television show, and connect with me on Facebook at Ingrid's World, and follow the show at Ingrid's World VA in Twitter and Instagram. Never miss an episode of Ingrid's World, because yes, I'm on Ingrid's World LLC YouTube channel and ingridsworld.org. Bye for now.